What's up, everybody? Jessie Evans here, therapist and owner of Steadfast Christian Counseling in Charleston. I'm going to try something different here for the next few weeks. I thought it would be really great to kind of take a deep dive into a few areas of mental health and do some psychoeducation, and then also do an episode on really some concrete strategies to work with each of these things. And so we're going to jump in and talk about anxiety for a few weeks here. And as an anxiety sufferer myself, I've had bouts that have really been heavy in my life, and then bouts that I've really been able to kind of manage a little bit more effectively. But man, this has been kind of a joy sucker for me over time. And so just really want to dive into anxiety first because it's near and dear to my heart. And we're going to talk today just about what's going on in the brain and the body when we experience anxiety. And I've got my little figure here. And by the way, my hands are pink. My daughter wanted pink hair last night, so I dyed her hair pink and then gave her a bonus of her ears also being pink and a little bit of her forehead and my hands. So definitely not a licensed, cosmetologist at all. But she loves it, so that's what matters. But anyway, so don't be distracted by my pink hands. Just let them be a reminder to you that, you need to have a licensed person help you. Okay, so we've got anxiety here with us today. I love the movie Inside Out, and specifically, they brought our girl anxiety into the mix this time around, and they really show what I'm going to be talking about a little bit in today's episode. They show how anxiety really is here to protect, and has a role within our internal family. And by the end of that movie, they really kind of help anxiety to feel like a part of the orchestra, and they help anxiety kind of be useful in the areas where she's really meant to be useful. And so sometimes when anxiety is really fired up for us, I like to think of it as like that part of the orchestra is just playing out of tune. And so for a lot of that movie and Inside Out, we see anxiety really playing too loudly for Riley. And then by the end, she's able to take her proper place. So that's the goal for all of us. Not that we get rid of anxiety. We need anxiety. If my house started to catch on fire right now as I'm sitting here, I need anxiety to kick in so I can get up, I can go get my child who's watching TV in the other room, and we can go. So anxiety has a part to play. But let's get into it here. So did you know that over 40 million adults in the U.S. suffer from anxiety disorders? That's a big number. Anxiety is one of the most common mental health challenges that we face. And even with that, so many of us don't understand what's happening in our brains and in our bodies when we feel anxious. And in Inside Out, it's beautiful the way that they do it, and it's easy to understand, but we really don't have like a control panel. It's a little bit different than that. So today we're going to dive into the science behind anxiety, what it does to our brains, and how it also affects our body. It's not just in our brains. And why understanding this connection can be a powerful first step towards managing anxiety. I really believe that knowledge is power. We're going to explore how anxiety works, from the amygdala to the release of stress hormones. And by the end of this episode, you're going to have a clearer understanding of what anxiety really is and how knowledge is key to taking control over it. We do not want anxiety to have the stick as the conductor of our orchestra. Anxiety has a place to sit in our orchestra, but we are the conductor of our own orchestra. Okay, so what is anxiety? Anxiety is more than just a feeling. It's more than just being stressed out or worried. It's actually a natural response that's evolved to protect us, like we just said. Anxiety is here to help us. Think of it as your brain's built-in alarm system. It's designed to keep you safe. Anxiety helps us respond respond to threats, like if I swerve to avoid an accident when I'm driving, or if I get like a big burst of energy before an exam, or I have to speak in front of a group of people. But not all anxiety is helpful. And this is something that, as you're watching this, you probably know all too well. Some anxiety is normal and can even be motivating. Like the nervousness, like I said before, you have to make a speech or maybe a job interview. But when anxiety is constant, when it's overwhelming, or when you're triggered by things that aren't truly dangerous, this is when anxiety disorders come into play. So we use that word disorder because, I mean, really, if you think about it, it's like, is anxiety creating disorder in my life? Just because I feel anxiety doesn't necessarily mean I have an anxiety disorder. But is my anxiety disrupting my life? Anxiety is much more common than we often realize. So when we diagnose anxiety, some common types include generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, and panic disorder. And each of those comes with kind of its own bag of unique challenges. So here's an example. In social anxiety disorder, a person might feel like intense fear about being judged by others, even in everyday situations like attending a meeting or going to a party. Or with panic disorder, this one kind of builds on itself. So with panic disorder, the fear of having another panic attack leads to avoidance of places where a person has previously experienced an attack. So if I've had a panic attack in an airport, which is my story, I don't really like going to airports. My body is reminded of, Jessie, you had a panic attack here one time. We were elevated in this space. Are you sure you want to go back into this space? I don't know if your body talks to you like that, but that's how I see my body talking to me. Okay, so let's talk about the brain and anxiety. So what's going on in the brain when you feel anxious? So it starts with a tiny almond-shaped part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala acts as the brain's fear center, and it's constantly scanning the environment for potential threats. When it senses something dangerous, whether it's like a car speeding towards you or even the thought of an event that's coming up in the future, it might trigger this response that we call a fight or flight response. But it's not just the amygdala. Anxiety also involves key chemicals in the brain called neurotransmitters, which, and sometimes supplementation-wise, as I'm reading some of these off, you might have heard people supplementing with different neurotransmitters. So these neurotransmitters act as messengers between the brain cells. One is serotonin, that helps regulate mood and anxiety levels. Norepinephrine plays a role in the body's stress response. And then GABA, another neurotransmitter, has a calming effect on the brain. And that's one that I hear a lot of people supplementing with. So when these chemicals are out of balance, anxiety can become more difficult to manage. So what's chronic anxiety? If your anxiety becomes chronic, or if your amygdala is constantly in overdrive, this can actually change the way your brain functions. So when we talk a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy, we talk a lot about like neuropathways in the brain. So when we have chronic anxiety and we're constantly in this place of kind of hypervigilance, looking for the next thing, we are actually building little pathways in our brain that we think of as like little roads, and it's easy for our thoughts to kind of pop into these roads the more habit we have in that place. And it actually can change the way your brain functions. The amygdala can become hypersensitive, meaning that it reacts more easily to triggers, while other parts of the brain that help you think logically or regulate your emotions might struggle to keep up. So we talk so much on our podcasts and in our training about learning to regulate your emotions, because this kind of really has it can have an opposite effect. If you're spending time learning how to manage your anxiety, learning how to regulate your emotions, learning how to get to a calm, safe space, feeling what that feels like in your body, you actually can build some neural pathway in some what we call parasympathetic areas. So in these areas of rest, restore, relaxation, and just like it's kind of easy for our minds to get into the rut of the sympathetic superhighway, we can also build a parasympathetic superhighway, and we can hop on that on-ramp. The more we practice it, the more we build a habit in those areas. But when we're not doing that, it's very hard to regulate our emotions. We feel triggered by lots of things. And it's not just about what you're thinking. There's so many things that go into this as you hopefully work with a therapist on managing your anxiety. So let's talk a little bit about the physical impact of anxiety. So when anxiety kicks in, your body is not just like standing here waiting for your mind to like figure everything out with your anxiety. No, your body is very much involved. The sympathetic nervous system jumps into action, preparing your body to respond to a threat. Your heart rate increases to pump more blood to your muscles. Your breathing speeds up to get more oxygen. And you might even start sweating as your body kind of cools itself down in preparation for like having to exert itself. At the same time, your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which give you that jolt of energy to either face danger head on or to escape it. This is why anxiety can make you feel jittery, restless, or on edge. It's why it's hard to kind of come down after you've experienced anxiety. But what happens when this response is triggered too often? Over time, chronic anxiety and the constant release of stress hormones can lead to real physical issues. High blood pressure, digestive problems like irritable bowel syndrome, and even a weakened immune system can all be linked to prolonged anxiety. And this is something that I've seen over and over in my work with clients, is that when people come in and we start really working to lower stress levels, they find that they feel better physically. This is why addressing anxiety isn't just about feeling better mentally. It's crucial for your physical health as well. Anxiety does not just affect the body, though. It also changes the way that we think and we feel. Have you ever, and this is what we were talking about with those superhighways. Have you ever found yourself stuck in a cycle of what if questions, where your mind jumps from one worry to the next? This is a common cognitive symptom of anxiety, where negative thought patterns like rumination and catastrophizing take hold. Instead of being able to think clearly, you might feel trapped in your thoughts, imagining worst case scenarios over and over again. This is actually one of my favorite scenes from Inside Out. They have the pillow fort people, and I don't know about you guys, but like my catastrophizing normally happens between the hours of like 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Like I wake up anxious, and then like it's just like in the movie. So anxiety is kind of like controlling these little brain minions, and they're drawing on paper all of these like worst case scenarios and holding them up for Riley to think about. But that is the way that anxiety shows up for me, in that catastrophizing way. Let's talk about emotional symptoms. So emotionally, anxiety can be exhausting. It's common to feel irritable or restless or experience a constant sense of dread, even when you can't quite put your finger on why. And how many of us who experience anxiety have been asked, like, well, why are you anxious? And we're just like, I don't know, but I am. It's very frustrating. There's a lot going on. You might also notice that anxiety makes it harder to enjoy the things that you usually love, as your mind is always preoccupied with something else. These emotional symptoms can start to spill over into your daily life, affecting your relationships, your work, and even how you view yourself. Anxiety can make it hard to concentrate. It can zap your energy, and it can leave you feeling disconnected from the people and the things that matter most. So let me recap. Anxiety is a natural response to stress. It's designed to protect us, but it can become overwhelming when it's constant or when it's triggered by things that aren't truly dangerous. It all starts with the brain, with the amygdala and the various neurotransmitters, but the effects are far-reaching, impacting not just your mind, but your body and your emotions as well. The good news is that understanding anxiety and the science behind it is a powerful first step towards managing it. When you know what's happening in your brain and your body, it becomes easier to recognize anxiety for what it is. It's a response. It's not a reality. It's not your identity. And now you can take steps to calm it, whether that's through therapy, mindfulness practices, or simply just being more aware of your triggers and your responses. Knowledge is your ally in this journey. If today's episode resonated with you, I encourage you to explore further. Feel free to call us at Steadfast, book an appointment with one of our counselors. Make sure you tune in to future episodes where we're going to dive into strategies for coping with anxiety. Remember, you're not alone in this, and understanding your anxiety is the first step toward reclaiming your peace of mind. I hope this was an encouragement to you today. Take care.